Hi everyone, I'm Joanna Penn from thecreativepenn.com and today I'm here with Emmanuel Nataf. Hi Emmanuel.
Hey Joanna, how you doing?
I'm good. It's great to have you on the show. Just a little introduction. Emmanuel is the co-founder and CEO of Reedsy, a marketplace that connects authors and professional freelancers, as well as a street photographer for fun. He's also a millennial and invested in cryptocurrency. Now, the reason I invited Emmanuel on is it's 10 years since the iPhone and the Kindle came on the market. So today we're looking into the future about what will affect authors in the next 10 years to 2027. And I got talking to Emmanuel over drinks one evening and discovered all this interesting stuff about him. So that's why he's on the show with me today. But before we get into it, just we've obviously had Ricardo on the show talking about what Reedsy is. But tell us, where are you from and why did you get into the publishing business as a tech startup?
Cool. Well, thanks a lot for having me on this podcast. It's really cool to be here. So where I'm from? So I'm from Paris. I was born and raised in Paris. Studied most of my studies in Paris as well, in France. I actually met Ricardo while we were studying in a business school. Studied a little bit in Toronto as well, so Canada. And I got into publishing because I just love cultural industries. And actually, when I moved to Canada, I was like, okay, I'm not going to bring all these books with me. I'm just going to get a Kindle and get all my books on it. And I thought that was a really interesting experience for me. I didn't read that much actually before getting my Kindle, and it became an enabler for me. Suddenly I would just load tons of books and read a lot more than I used to. And I started to get into that world. I love cultural industries. As you mentioned, I do a lot of street photography in my spare time. So whenever I'm not working on Reedsy, then I just, go out and take pictures of people on the street. I shoot them, but I don't kill them. And I started to learn about that space, and I realized how how amazing self-publishing was, as a concept, essentially, as a business model, all the creativity the creative freedom that you were getting out of it. And I thought that was really amazing. But at the same time, I was a bit like, okay, this is awesome. You can just, push a book to the Kindle store or any other store and get most of the royalties back. I thought that was amazing. But at the same time, most of the books that were self-published didn't feel that great. So that was just in 2013 or something like that, when I first had the idea. And I was like, how can we make that process better? There's a lot of people who are just going to create a WordPress blog and certainly they look like, professional journalists. How do we make that happen for people who want to publish books? So I realized that a lot of people who used to work in-house at publishing companies were available and working as freelancers. Started to interview some of them, trying to get an understanding of what they were looking for, how they would get clients and everything. Interviewed over 100 people, I think. And then progressively felt like, it wasn't that hard maybe to match great professionals with authors who were looking to publish a high-quality book. So that's how I got into the space. Then it took a little bit of time before I, put a team together, started the company with Ricardo, as you mentioned, who was on the podcast recently. And then, we built an MVP, we raised a bit of money, and now we've helped produce about 3,500 books. So, which is kind of cool.
It is cool, and I love Reedsy. It's fantastic, and having that vetted professional stuff. So, but let's get into the topic of today, because you talk there as the Kindle as a technical enabler for your reading, and I think that's the positive slant we want to bring today. Is that technology as an enabler for things that people have been doing for ages. So like photography is enabled by Instagram. The Kindle is enabled reading. So I wanted to start with the blockchain, because you and I were talking about that one evening, and the Alliance of Independent Authors has recently launched Blockchain for Books initiative. Now, it's so interesting because I've talked to a lot of people my age, I'm 42, and older, and people are like, they're confused about what blockchain is, whether it's the same as Bitcoin, what is cryptocurrency, and why the hell should authors be interested. So let's start with explaining what is blockchain and why is it different to Bitcoin?
Cool. So people started to talk about Bitcoin roughly in 2009. Because there's that random guy or random group of people on the internet who posted a blog post, a post on a forum, and saying, "Hey, I created Bitcoin." And if you actually Google that, if you just Google Satoshi Nakamoto on Google, and you try to find the first blog post, you're going to find it, and it's really funny because you see the origins of the whole concept, the whole project, and so basically Bitcoin is it's a cryptocurrency. It's basically a token that will allow people to transact and store money, store value in a decentralized fashion. So that's kind of like an interesting open network, so a decentralized network for the financial industry, basically. And blockchain is more a concept, more kind of the underlying technology. And Bitcoin is just an application of it, but there's tons of different cryptocurrencies that exist for different purposes. And the concept behind blockchain is that instead of having a central organization that owns all the information about something, you're going to have an open, distributed database ledger that records all transactions in a very efficient way, in an irreversible way as well. So that's so it's called a blockchain because you add different bits of a chain one after the other. They have a mathematical relationship, so you can verify that something happened after something else, essentially.
Yeah, and I know everyone's going, okay, I still don't understand that. Because I've been reading this over and over again in an attempt to try and understand it. But I think, just taking it up a level for people, it's like the internet. We don't have to understand the internet in order to use the internet, right? I don't need to know how to program.
Totally.
So that's kind of what I'm saying with blockchain. It's you don't need to understand the code or the technical side of things, right? It's more do you, I guess the question is, do you feel like this is what the internet was, I guess, back in the 80s when you were, I guess, just born or something. But yeah, whatever. But it's that at the point where the internet started, it was very technical and only a certain number of people used it. But then it became something that kind of took over. So if we're thinking about how is the blockchain, by 2027, how do you think the blockchain and cryptocurrencies will affect authors, or will we be using them?
Okay, so I agree with that. So unless you want to start investing in that sphere and in cryptocurrencies, you probably don't need to get to go too much in depth and try to understand really what's going on. But if you do, you should probably do some reading. Try to understand what's happening and the technical aspects of it. But essentially, we're making cryptography, more mainstream in a way and useful for different purposes. So there's going to be tons of different applications. Basically, there isn't a single industry that's not going to be disrupted by blockchain technology. So anything you can think of, it's going to change. Right now, we live in a very weird world. Where, so as you said, we thought the internet would be a very decentralized, technology, and it turned out, not to be a decentralized, technology. In the end, it's a few players controlling the internet. Probably everyone who's listening to the show right now has a Facebook account, and all their information, is processed by Facebook and is sold by Facebook to third parties, basically. So it's very weird, and you look at the consequences, the U.S. election potentially, and you're whoa, this is sad. You look at hundreds of millions of Americans maybe who still ads that the Russians vote or something like that, and that is possible because you have a centralized entity, and it's very easy to then access everyone and just advertise to everyone. So, and it's really funny that now Facebook is going to hire 10,000 people to remove misinformation by the end of 2018. But Facebook is just one example. You look at, authors. So authors, obviously, they put their book available on the Kindle store or any other store. And, they give 30% of their royalties to Amazon. Well, we could think that in the future, there might be a decentralized Amazon where basically there's no fees, there's no commission. Like maybe there's a tiny fee for operating transactions and running contracts basically through a platform. But that world where you give 30% to Apple, whenever you sell an app, or 30% to Amazon whenever you sell a book or whatever it is, it might disappear. And you can think of applications for that in literally every single industry.
So I think that the key point here is that decentralization. So as you say, right now, pretty much everyone listening is going to use Amazon KDP to sell most of their books to customers around the world. But, I've started selling direct through some things, but PayPal, for example, paying by email in multiple currencies, PayPal kind of owns that space. I mean, there are other things. So do you see that by 2027, we would mostly be doing transactions globally on the blockchain with decentralized payments directly to customers? Or do you see companies like Amazon and PayPal creating applications on the blockchain so we kind of still use them like that?
I don't know whether Amazon's going to build a blockchain-based Amazon. Maybe. That'd be good for them, actually. But right now, what you're seeing is a lot of organizations that, they're non-profit, essentially. But they're building the infrastructure and those platforms that are going to allow people to transact. So it's never going to be just you. There's always going to be, some kind of platform that people are going to use, and it's going to be the go-to platform to basically make that happen. But it's just that platform, that intermediary, will not charge you 30% every time you sell something. They're gonna create an open source technology that anyone, if they want to, can change and build on top of it their own version of the platform. So it's gonna be really interesting. You can imagine that in the future, instead of having switching back to Facebook again, but instead of having Zuckerberg waking up in the morning and saying the future is going to be like this, and policies at Facebook are going to be like that, maybe there's a bunch of developers based wherever in Estonia, or I don't know, wherever in Asia, wherever you want on the planet, that are going to think, oh, okay, so that code does that right now. How about we change this bit or that bit? And we're going to build our own version of Facebook, and maybe adoption will take off and more people will use it. So you have an infinite number of Facebooks basically that could exist in the future. Same for Amazon, but hopefully there will be kind of an interesting platform to make that happen to start with.
No, it's so funny because I've been thinking recently about how I was away somewhere and someone said sci-fi authors have really old websites because they built them first. Many of them built them back in the day, and before WordPress, for example. So it's almost like, when you build something now, you've got the benefits of everything. And Jeff Bezos said, and I think it was 2015, Amazon will be disrupted. And I was thinking, when you build a massive system on a particular technical platform, to actually upgrade that is a lot harder than building something from scratch on a new platform. So you're more likely to see another wave of disruptive technologies. There's
one of the biggest challenges to disrupt Amazon, essentially, is that Amazon doesn't just sell digital products. If you're selling a digital product to someone, then it's fairly straightforward. When the file has been downloaded, when the file has been read, you have lots of information about how the people used that digital asset that you were selling. If you want to send it's a Reedsy book, then you need a proof that the person who actually bought it received it. So you need, the supply chain, the infrastructure underneath to allow you to verify that someone actually got the book in the end. So disrupting Amazon is there's, you can probably you can see very easily how some people are going to disrupt, some aspects of it, like so Amazon sells, they sell ebook. That feels like something that can be disrupted, not fairly easily, but that feels really doable. Same for any digital product, essentially. But this lie in a way, they started making their own TV shows and their own movies and everything. So so in the end, you're going to go to Amazon maybe because they have interesting content. So it's so interesting. But for physical products, it's a different story because there's physical activity that's involved. So go disrupt that. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and with physical products as well, it's, thinking about a book, actually the technology for printing books won't be disrupted by like 3D printing, because that's more for, shapes and things, not for pages with printed text on. So it is quite interesting that older technology will probably remain. So, I appreciate that. The other thing I wanted to ask about on the contract side, which is something the Alliance of Independent Authors are talking about, is that you could do much easier contracts around foreign rights. You could do micropayments. So, for example, I can have a micropayment. Whenever one digital book is sold, X percent goes to me, X percent goes to the editor, X percent goes to Reedsy if you did the connections. So that micropayments, and sort of given what's happening in India with micropayments and digital currency, is that a big shift, do you think?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. So as we said earlier, like blockchain, Bitcoin is one application of the blockchain technology. But a few years ago, there's something else that emerged called Ethereum, which is built on the blockchain, built to create decentralized applications, essentially. So they call them dApps, decentralized applications. And with that, you're able to create smart contracts, which are basically bits of code that developers submit and are executed by a distributed network of computers, essentially. And with that, we should be able to do what you just described. And it's really interesting because it's not a new idea. Like the idea of having multiple people sharing royalties by the execution of a contract in a completely automated fashion. There was that startup, I think, called Netminds, and there's been quite a few, actually. They're dead now, but it doesn't really matter. That idea that, you could have contracts that would be automatically executed to pay different artists, different creatives, is not a new idea. But certainly we have the technology to make that happen. So it's going to be extremely interesting. Micropayments, maybe we're going to pay you, every page you read, we can send you money. Every page that is read, then maybe we can send you money. It's going to be quite interesting. There's going to be new business models, essentially. So that's why, I flipped it around just a second ago, because in the future, maybe you don't get paid when people read the page, but people when and in the end, you make money off people who don't finish your book. You can pay people to read your book, and all the people who don't finish it, they obviously, you get them, you keep the money, and if they do finish it, then you send it back, essentially.
Ah, interesting. Well, and this is the thing, because I think the big shift in cryptocurrency is, even though most of us are using not real money. I mean, we are not going around doing most of our payments and receipts with actual money. People still get confused about cryptocurrency. It's just the word makes it difficult. And when you talk about payments, people are still thinking physical transfers and stuff. So I guess, here we should just say to everyone, there is actually nothing that authors can do right now to take advantage of this, is there? It's more like, this is happening, just be aware of it. Is there anything else you would advise people?
Yeah, and the reason why it's not, and no one can do anything with it, is that the technologies are not ready for to be used at scale, essentially. So a technology like Bitcoin can process something like 8 transactions a second, when a company like Visa or MasterCard can do 1,000 transactions a second. So obviously all those technologies, they're they're going to evolve. They will have roadmaps with, significant changes to the technology, and they're going to test things, and they're going to fail. Essentially, all those technologies are like very early stage companies right now. Things you would invest in when there's like 5 employees. So things you don't necessarily want to trust. Actually, we'll find out. But yeah, for authors, there is no right now. They don't have to panic because there's nothing they can really do with it. They can just think and be inspired.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what we're doing. We're sort of thinking 2027, what are some of the exciting things? And this is exciting because it can it can give us more of a percentage of sale. It can give us micropayments, which will enable us to reach these other countries. But let's talk about something. Sorry.
There's actually a startup, but there's a website called Steemit, so Steem, EEM, and it.com. And it's really interesting because it's kind of a Reddit. It's very similar to Reddit, but it's built on the blockchain, essentially. So there's 3 or 4 different types of currencies, basically. So you can buy Steem Dollar, and you can reward people who are actually writing interesting content. And people who curate content are rewarded as well with coins that they can use. And there's different types of coins. It's interesting. There's something called Steem Power that gives you more authority on the platform. And it's super interesting to see that in the past, today, you go on the platform, you give all your information, you publish high quality content. And in the end, the company that really becomes successful out of it is the company that created that platform. It's Facebook, it's Google, it's whoever. But if you publish a great post on Facebook, you might get likes. Okay, and if you advertise a product behind it, maybe you'll sell something. But in the end, you're a user of the platform, and you're not really rewarded for being a user. In the future, with tokens, the value of your tokens, whatever the currency is, whatever the platform is, the value might increase as the number of people who join that platform increases. So suddenly you're not just a user, and you're just kind of like an animal that big companies use for advertising. You actually have some kind of ownership in the product, and it's very, very different.
Oh goodness! See, we've got so many other things to cover. So let's move on, because one of the things that is really happening already is the AI and machine learning, so artificial intelligence and machine learning. So, AIs have been writing nonfiction articles and sports journalism and technical journalism for a couple of years now, I think, and recently have started writing not very good fiction, but one AI got into the finals of a Japanese literature competition, and this Halloween, as we talk in 2017, MIT had a horror bot that was putting out horror stuff. And what was interesting is somebody emailed me or it was on Twitter or something and said, this is high school quality work, with the assumption that this wasn't very good. And I was like, if this is high school quality work, then this is a very good AI, because that's pretty amazing if they're already that developed. So I'm looking forward, because in 2027 I fully intend to be using as much AI as possible as like a centaur, like in chess. They have AI centaurs who work with the chess master and beat the AI alone or human alone. So I'm really excited, but many people are very scared, and there's these kind of scary articles like, you will be out of a job, writers, because of AI. So what are your feelings around AI and how we will work with them?
Yeah, I think one of the best ways of getting an understanding of what AI can do today is to watch that video. I can probably find the name of it, but it was they had it featured at the Barbican, museum in London. A few months ago, there was an entire exhibition about sci-fi, and they were talking about the first sci-fi movies and everything. And at the end of the exhibition, there was kind of a short clip, and one of the main actors in that short clip is one of the guys the main actor in the TV show Silicon Valley, and he was basically the script was basically something that that had been compiled by AI. And it's really funny because it feels like it makes sense. Like the tone, everything, the story, it feels like, it feels like there's something happening. But the more you listen, the more you realize that it makes no sense. And it's really interesting because it gives you an idea of what AI can do today. So if you Google it, I'll try to give you the link afterwards.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, but it's pretty interesting. Gives you a sense of what AI can do today. So should people be scared of AI? AI today is nothing really scary today, because essentially, as you just described it, actually. With the MIT researchers that compiled create a horror stories based on Reddit posts, hundreds of thousands of Reddit posts. Essentially, they're doing that based on historical data. Essentially, and all the AI we have today, it's mostly scripted AI. So it's like you're playing a video game and you have a sense of, there's characters and they have the script and they're going to move around and it feels like, they're doing their thing, but in fact, it's mostly scripted, essentially. And we're doing that because it allows us to control the outcome. If suddenly, we play a video game or we are in some kind of experience where we can't control the outcome, then you don't know what people should be looking at, you don't know what people should be doing, and you can be worried about the consequences as well. So maybe we started doing that kind of like scripted AI simply because it's simpler for us to understand, and also because we didn't really have the technology to do any better. But when you think about it, we built a world where you're gonna have tons of people saying, oh, this is an aubergine and this is not an aubergine, and like teaching a machine, what an aubergine looks like and what an aubergine doesn't look like. And it's kind of like the state of the AI right now. And so we're able to do slightly more sophisticated things. I saw that Udemy, for instance, like the online learning platform, what they do to train for the sales team, instead of having the salesperson type a response fully, they have some kind of AI machine learning system that allows them to pre-compose messages so the customer support person doesn't have to write the full message. And the way it's pre-composed, they make sure that they know that that message is going to convert better than any other one. So they have a pre-composed message that's supposed to convert well, and then the customer support person can add the information that's required for that specific customer. So that's the kind of things that we're able to do right now with it, but it's not like the machine that comes out of nowhere and just like and learns and does their own thing.
But in 2027, in 10 years' time, I mean, the state of machine learning that Google is doing or Alphabet is doing right now, there's been some big leaps with machine learning. So what do you think in 2027 the AIs will be like?
Yeah, so we're going from scripted AI to an AI that can learn, meaning that it doesn't need historical data, as you described with like AlphaGo Zero. It didn't need like millions of games of information to know how to play. It would just play and then lose or win, and then because it's a computer, it can play billions of games super quickly, and as a result become really good. So that's, I think, one of the biggest differences, but it's still very early because we're doing that with a game. And okay, the Go is a complicated game, much more complicated than chess, or like there's many more outcomes that are possible. But still, we're not talking about doing anything extremely sophisticated right now. And it's interesting. There's like that video game company called Unity. They basically showed how, like, with that new generation of AI and neural networks, how you can they just have a basic game with like a ball that's going on the platform, and the game is the machine is basically learning how to hold the ball straight on that platform, essentially. And it takes just 30 seconds for the game to learn how to do that, which is kind of cool. But it's kind of the level at which we are right now in terms of actual AI that learns.
Yeah, I'm still excited.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to my AI assistant. So one thing that is around the learning is translation and voice search. So voice search has kind of gone mainstream in the last year with the Echo and the Google Home things, and Siri and all the Cortana and all that. So people are using their voice for search, and real-time translation is happening with Skype has a thing. Kickstarter has a whole load of what look like real-time translation. Now, obviously, you're French, so you understand the translation thing a lot more than me because I'm British, and obviously British people are terrible at languages. But what do you think about the translation possibilities in the next 10 years for reading in other languages?
Yeah, no, it's actually interesting you asking me that question, because when I was raising money for Reedsy, one investor who was actually not interested in investing in Reedsy, one morning wakes up and says, "Hey, do you have that tool that my dad can use so he can read that book that's in English, but he doesn't read English, he only reads Spanish?" And no, dude, I don't have that tool. It doesn't exist. Either he finds a translation, or he reads it in English. Anyway, and I thought that was quite interesting, because obviously right now there's no on-demand translation service that does an amazing job, or it works for basic things. There's that company called Unbabel. I don't know if you've heard about it. They basically have a machine that does the basic translating, so just voice recognition, and then translates kind of word by word. And then they have a community of human beings who are actually going to edit that translation. So you can have people watching the conference on the internet, and then maybe there's going to be a slight delay, but we're going to be able to translate extremely quickly what the person on stage actually said. And that's kind of it's kind of a mix of, working with humans and and actually working with the machine. Google, I think they recently revamped the translation service for Chinese. But I know it took them, years to actually go from that very basic system to something slightly more sophisticated. And still, I think the technology they have is insanely slow compared to the previous one. It gives better translation, much better translation, but it's insanely slow. So they actually, so I know they had to add transitions and stuff, so people don't realize that there's actually, a lot of processing going on to actually translate the sentence. So we're going great progress. I wish I spoke Chinese to be able to see what Google did with Google Translate, but it's a fairly recent change, and yeah, it's getting super interesting. But translation, for the literary world, translate basic articles, technical stuff, it's been out there for a while. But to translate novels, you're gonna need something really, really smart, because translating is rewriting. It's not just translating.
Yeah, which is why I kind of see it as it will be very possible for non-fiction, there's probably ways we could do non-fiction right now. And there's possibly, there's tools you can run novels over to say how the level of the language. And there's obviously a big difference between books that are aimed at a reading age of 14, which apparently is the average reading age in America, versus, a literary fiction novel that wins prizes. Those are very different languages. So I can see it kind of moving on that scale. So non-fiction first, as you say, you can pretty much translate websites and articles right now, which are non-fiction.
Yeah, totally.
So do you see that transition, it's like a phased thing?
Yeah, but I can remember when I saw a video of scientists in the 50s, during the Cold War. Basically, you had to translate, wanted to know what the Russians were saying, and they wanted a machine that would translate very fast from Russian into English. So they started developing that machine that would actually translate things, and it was back in the 50s. So we've been able to translate things almost on demand for a while. But doing something more literary, when you need to understand the political, historical, cultural context and everything, we're still a bit far from it. But people were already talking about it in the 50s, or maybe even before, and I'm not aware of it. So maybe it takes a bit longer than what we would expect.
Well, it's interesting. This is the problem with a 10-year timeline right, because that I haven't got the dates written down, but the sequencing of our human genome, they had the project was meant to take however many years, like a long time, and then Craig Venter went and did it a lot faster than expected, and now the cost is a lot lower and it's a lot faster, and they can do it in no time at all, and that gets quicker all the time. But that technology was almost like a step change. It was like yesterday it was going to take another 20 years, and then today it only took 2 years. So with 10 years, it's really kind of hard to see what will have a step change. It feels like the blockchain will be a step change. It will literally just, because it's happening, all the banks are looking at blockchain, right? Because they know they're going to be disintermediated, or whatever the word is.
So the banks, it's really funny because, they set up funds to invest, or incubators and funds, to invest and follow startups. And then the CEO wakes up and says, this is all bullshit, and then you have headlines in every newspaper. It's really funny.
Yeah, I think they're trying to keep it down from the mainstream, while in the background they're building their own stuff on the blockchain.
Yeah, they're often building like private applications.
Exactly.
That, kind of like the opposite of, the whole concept of blockchain, actually. But also maybe to solve some of the scalability issues that some of those technologies have. But yeah.
Yeah, and I can see a lot of people who aren't comfortable with it using their established bank blockchain. They'll be like, oh, it's just a new technology my bank is doing, like the mobile app, that's what it is. And other people will use it in a different way. But let's move on to augmented reality and virtual reality, because I actually wrote an article about the VR bookstore back in March 2015. As usual, I'm always very optimistic about timelines, and we're still nowhere near that, and it's not gone mainstream. AR, when people hold up a phone and can see things. So translation, AR translation, you can hold up your app over a sign in Japan and it will tell you the sign in English. So that's a kind of augmented reality. So what do you think of AR and VR? What do you reckon going to happen there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I went to an event a few months ago about AR and VR. And there was one of the founders of a company called Blipar, which is, they create a bunch of AR and VR technologies. And what the guy did is, like, he took his phone out of his pocket and he pointed it at someone in the room, and he had an idea that person was relatively, not, I wouldn't say famous, but, like a guy with like a certain following on the internet, someone you would want to get information about. He pointed it at that person, and then the phone detected who it was and started to give information about that very person. And they already have a significant database of like faces, and they're able to do face recognition super fast, and then bring out, like, get interesting results about that person. So it's interesting, but it's like the reaction of the audience when he did that was really weird, because most people were like, okay, I'm not sure I want people to be able to, like,
that was a bad example.
But but what I find really interesting is, like, the application of VR for the real world. Not just VR for the sake of VR, but VR for applications in the real world. So, for instance, I saw that video recently, for healthcare and all kind of stuff. So right now you have docked the Western world, but not necessarily the same access to healthcare in different and other parts of the world. And you can think that with VR, we're going to be able to do surgery remotely. Let's say you just have the right tools, the right machine somewhere on the planet. You just need a doctor based wherever, in London, Paris, San Francisco, wherever, and they can, like, do surgery on someone who is on the other side of the planet. They just need the right internet connection, essentially. And also just to train surgeons, for instance, like there's stuff, that you don't do surgery on very often. So how do you train doctors? Well, you can have those new tools. We're going to need new devices, basically, to experience all those new things. But you can have those new tools that, you have some feedback whenever you hit something, and then whether you can keep going or not. And that's going to be really interesting. I saw there's a company called Glitchers. They have, I don't know if you saw, they have an app that was downloaded like maybe 3 million times, and that helped advanced dementia research, essentially. So they make people in a special environment and they look at how they react. And since it's a very immersive experience, they're able to like get information about who has dementia or who doesn't, essentially. So it's a kind of applications that I find extremely interesting. I haven't seen, I have to say, like things that are this interesting in the book space, essentially. But hopefully that will come. But that often comes with like interesting devices, because right now, if everybody has to put their phone in front of their face or whatever headset, I'm not sure that VR is going to be that interesting. Right now, there's probably more interesting applications for AR in general than VR, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I see the VR thing as more like, there's online summits at the moment or online training courses like Reedsy have, where you decide I'm going to sit down right now and I'm going to go and do this course online. And I kind of see that more like, okay, I'm going to go and attend a summit in VR, and we would be doing, I see myself doing a podcast in VR. We would be in an environment instead of Skype that people could actually come and, see it live, or instead of doing, summits on a flat screen, you would be able to do it and teach. So I see the application is more around teaching and training and learning than, reading a book necessarily. And like you said, the medical technology, people learning how to operate. And I've seen videos of, electronic stuff, where people wear an AR visor and they can actually see, it's telling them where to put the thing. And so it's kind of the training aspect, I think, is interesting. And also the marketing, because I could walk around London recording where I am. And then if you were in London, you could bring up your AR thing and follow me around, virtually, kind of that way.
Yeah, there's also like really interesting applications for designers, because like right now you're moving a model on a 2D, a 2D screen, when you could actually be moving around your object and like changing it as you move around, like, which is like just a totally different experience.
Which is very cool. And I think this is really important, because I see authors need to think about applications for their books that go beyond the book. So that's almost like a gaming experience, or a solve this murder mystery. You actually get to go into and find the objects and stuff like that kind of thing. I think will become more happening.
Yeah, it's a very interesting change. Like, instead of us building weird interfaces to manipulate things, we're actually going to manipulate the end product directly. It's a bit like on the phone, like, when Apple introduced that kind of like natural scrolling, you would be moving the content instead of moving the page. So instead of scrolling, so it changed the way people scroll on the page, and it felt very weird to a lot of people. But in the end, what Apple did is like they made us move the content. We were directly touching with our fingers the content, instead of having kind of a quirky interface where we'd like, with a mouse, we would be moving the scrolling bar on the side. And it's kind of the same. It's like an even more advanced change in terms of user interface. It's really interesting.
Oh goodness, there's still so much we could talk about, and I know we're pretty much out of time. But I did want to the thing that I think is more urgent in terms of the thing that will probably happen soon, or is happening, is by 2025 it's expected that 8 billion people will be on the internet. Now, in the leapfrog countries, so sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, where they're not going to have laptops or desktops, they're going straight to mobile economies with digital currency. So, and I'm excited about that, because these are where our customers can be right now, but also more customers, like the middle classes in India or Nigeria, or there are lots of countries in the world who have not gone digital yet in terms of their reading. So are you thinking about that? Are you excited about global and digital? Do you think that's going to happen sooner?
Yeah, I mean, it's sooner, I don't know, like 8 billion people on the internet. What do we have right now? 2 or 3?
Yeah, it's like three or four. Yeah.
By in the next 8 years, more than 5 billion more on the internet. I don't know. It sounds reasonable. But in terms of opportunities, it's obviously more customers, and maybe with like things like blockchain, we can have like a more global, competitive landscape. Because right now you do have like a Chinese market and a Russian market and a kind of a more Western market. but they don't really work with each other that much. You know, when you go to China, you just, you know, you're on your computer and you're like, what can I do really that I'm used to, you know, to be doing? So it's a very weird feeling. So even though it's the internet, it's still not that decentralized and not everybody's got access to everything. So it's going to be not just more customers, but a lot more competition. Which is interesting.
Yes, but it's interesting. So on the competition aspect, because of course Reedsy is connecting writers with professionals, and I write nonfiction for authors. So, and I've been telling writers this. So if you write fiction, you should also be writing how-to nonfiction about how you write fiction, because the number of new writers coming online is also
it's huge. Yeah.
Exponential. So and the self-help environment is only getting bigger, right? With self-driving cars, the end of jobs, aging boomers, you know, all these things that we haven't even talked about will bring more people into the writing environment. And
above all, people will have a lot more time.
Exactly. More time. And they want to create.
Because right now we still work jobs. Like, you know, most people have a job, but in the future, people might not need a job. So we'll find out. But, you know, like, I have a friend of mine who was telling me that in Japan, they started to educate the population to the idea that they might not have a job, like the kids might not have a job in the future, and that's fine.
Exactly.
I don't know whether it's going to happen or whether it's going to be totally different. But we can think that maybe in the future people won't have a job, and maybe the unemployment rate will be like totally irrelevant because you know everybody won't be making money without necessarily having to work. So then we have to do something else. What do we do?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, universal credit and these sort of big shifts are probably the things that will shape the next 10 years that are coming. But then just from your perspective as someone who is, you know, a lot younger than me, and many people listening are hear the end of jobs or people won't have a job and they are very scared. So as, you know, someone who is growing up, oh no, you are grown up obviously, but you know, someone who is much more happy with a lot of this technology, what are you excited about? Like, are you optimistic about the next 10 years?
Yeah.
You know?
You know, I'm happy and not happy. I don't have a Facebook account. You know, so like I'm happy and totally aware of like all the bad things that comes with technology. And for me, like Facebook is one of the worst things on the internet. But I still love technology. You know, I'm the guy who's going to start an account for like the next social network the day it's out. And then maybe if I see that there's something wrong with it, I'll just stop. So like, we're in a situation where, you know, we're all kind of like our worst enemy and like, you know, we can destroy ourselves if we want to.
But no, you've got to be positive. Like what do you see for the next 10 years of Reedsy, for example? You know, you've got a company, you know, what do you see coming?
So I'm sorry, I'm not responding, but I never look at anything like from a 10 years perspective. I mean, like, I like to do it as kind of an exercise, but for the company itself, I look at it like, you know, what's going to happen in 18 months max. And when you raise money from investors, most of them ask you like, you know, you raise money for 18 months most of the time. So you don't want to be raising every year, but every year and a half you go out and raise money. Not everyone. We're not doing that right now at Reedsy, but a lot of startups actually do that. So I don't really look at it, you know, over like a 10-year period, but more like, you know, a couple of years. And right now we have a lot of things to grow, and we are quite focused on a problem, trying to maybe release a new product for that. So it's kind of like our current focus. But what I'll be or what Reedsy will be in 10 years, I have no idea. And I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. But, you know, like the future is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, it's whatever you want it to be. So if we decided to destroy ourselves, we'll destroy ourselves. Or if we decide to colonize, you know, to go on Mars and just live there, then, you know, we'll make that happen. But in the end, it's not that interesting. We got cars, you know, amazing technology, and then we started, you know, crashing ourselves into whatever. Then we added seat belts, and then we added airbags, and then we added traffic lights. So we keep going, you know, we keep adding more stuff and adding more complexity to our lives. But in the end, it's not necessarily like what matters. So it's kind of like technology can be an enabler, but it's not the ultimate goal, essentially.
And that's good. That kind of circles back because we started off talking about technology as an enabler, and that's basically what we should be doing going forward, right? As authors and entrepreneurs, we will use technology as an enabler and move forward.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So tell people where they can find you and Reedsy online.
Yeah, so as I said, I'm not on Facebook, but you can find me on Twitter. So Emmanuel Nataf. And if you want to email me, I'm emmanuel@reedsy.com. So I'm guessing it will be somewhere in the notes.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for your time, Emmanuel. That was great.
Thank you very much.